Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons Learned, the dumbest thing I've ever done with money. My name is Suzanne, and I'm the head coach at Grace Financial Coaching, and I'm excited to welcome Chad Hufford today. Chad is born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska. Not many people on this show from there. Chad grew up in the financial industry, but also developed a strong background in athletics, nutrition, and performance psychology. He is a top-ranked financial planner and part of Dave Ramsey's SmartVestor Pros, for those of you who know what that is. Chad brings a coaching mindset and the heart of a teacher to his financial planning and investing. He strives to empower and educate his audience, not only to become better investors, but to live more intentionally and create an abundant life. Chad owns Veritas Wealth Management, and it manages $500 million and serves several hundred families all across the U.S. Chad, tell us how it is up in Alaska today.
It is cold, but grateful for good insulation and good heating system. Winter is upon us. It was snowing last night at the house, so yeah, I think it's time to wear heavier clothing, and wish I could grow some hair. It's getting
I was
cold
going to
out
say, the
there,
last
Suzanne.
time I talked to you, you didn't have the jacket on, so it must be getting a little colder there.
It's getting colder. It's getting colder. Yep.
So now you are from Alaska, and I understand your wife is as well, too.
Yep. Yeah, we're both born and raised up here. We didn't meet until we were adults, but I actually hunted with my wife's uncle several times. So when I was growing up, he used to take me hunting, and yeah, but we never got connected until we were adults, and now the rest is history. Just celebrated our 18th anniversary last week.
Very nice. Congratulations. My anniversary was last week, too. We'll have to talk about that off the air. And
Happy
then any
anniversary.
kids? Yes, thank you. Any kids floating around?
Yep, we've got 6 kids, and our oldest is 15, almost 6 feet tall, and so I'm looking up at my baby girl, which is crazy. And then we've got 6 or 15 down to a 3-year-old,
Gotcha.
and
I have
everything in
I have a
between.
couple of female cousins who are over 6 feet tall. It makes me feel like the short one, and I'm 5'6". So awesome.
That's
So what made you? I know you in your bio you had you grew up in the financial industry, so we weren't just hunting. What does that mean?
Well, my dad was doing a lot of investment advising, and even through like the church, he was involved in Crown Financial, which is kind of almost a forerunner to Financial Peace University. It was put on by Larry Burkett, and it was done as a small group setting. And I would say it was the focus was a little more on the education, whereas Financial Peace is high on the execution, which both are very important. It was more conceptual and philosophical rather than the steps and strategies that Financial Peace does. So they're both really good. And this was, I think Dave Ramsey took a lot of that and just packaged it, made it a little bit more applicable, or not more applicable, made it easier to apply. So, I mean, I grew up with my dad teaching those classes. We were very open about finances. I learned a lot of great financial, not just tools, but mindsets. Developed a pretty good relationship with money. And really, when Dave Ramsey came on the scene, I was like, I mean, this is what I've seen working my entire life. So the joke is kind of, we were doing Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey was, and it was such a blessing to have that and to be able to learn from others' mistakes. Not that I didn't make my own, because sometimes you just have to do it yourself, but
Yep.
but to be able to have that foundation and background, and I just thought that was normal. I thought the way that my parents did money, I thought the way that we were taught was normal. And then I got to college. I'm like, oh my goodness, like people are crazy with their money, and just see how widely accepted debt was, and just to see how, I mean, we all live in the moment from time to time, but just to see how detached people were from the future consequences of their current decisions, which of course, I mean, yeah, college is a microcosm of that, where it's like a 4-year experiment of doing things that we wish we could undo that have future consequences that we never thought about while we're in the moment.
Yeah. So, so you went to college, obviously. What did you major in there?
Biochemistry.
What?
I've got a degree in biochemistry, and
What?
my
What
background
made
was
you
in
do
lipid
that?
medicine. My plan, Suzanne, was to go into medicine, and I was really interested in endocrinology, the study of hormones and the interactions there, and also surgery. Being a trauma surgeon still is extremely interesting to me. We actually work with several.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but my plan was to be a surgeon, and then I met the woman who's now my wife and realized that she wanted a family, she wanted a husband, she wanted somebody to raise kids with, not a hotshot surgeon. And not that people can't balance being a physician with a strong family life, but I just knew what I wanted to accomplish in the medical world, and I don't think, even to this day, I don't think I would have been able to balance my ambitions with a good, healthy family life and
Hmm.
being an excellent surgeon with being an excellent father and husband. And I know people that do it. I just don't think I was wired that way. And I had to look and think, well, what do I really want to do with my life? And what does this look like? And what are the impacts I want to make? How can I still impact people and empower them to live a life of freedom and abundance? Because really, that's kind of always been my why.
Hmm.
Um, Medicine was one pathway, and I just realized that finance is another pathway. And
Well,
yeah, I
and
spent
one could make the argument that you're actually going to touch more people by doing what you're doing now than as a surgeon. Not everybody has a surgery during their lifetime.
and not
You could theoretically cast a wider net with what you're doing now.
so two things on that. So number one, I look back at there was this sunk cost idea of like 4 years of studying biochemistry. And not to brag, but I actually finished it in 3 because I switched majors. But I finished the biochemistry in 3. So do I throw away 3 years of super intense study and everything I gave up and all that hard work? What I didn't realize until later is I wasn't throwing it away. Biochemistry, we might not have a chance to get into it today, but actually prepared me very well for financial planning, because this idea of taking all these different variables and trying to make sense of them, and the idea of experimentation as a learning process, not as failure. But that might be a
Mm,
conversation for another time. So I looked at, okay, I've 4 years of college, but I had 20 years of growing up in the household of a financial advisor, teaching all these classes. And I was like, I have a huge background. It just wasn't official. It didn't have a bunch of letters after my name. Um, so that was very valuable too. And I had to make a choice between the two. But to your point, realizing that I could probably have an even bigger impact in people's lives. And here was one of the aha moments for me, is a surgeon that was mentoring me. And he said, I've gotten to know you well enough to know something that's really going to bother you is when you put your best forward, when you wake up in the middle of the night, come down and and execute with excellence your best work on somebody who is going to ultimately put themselves in harm's way voluntarily again, and you're not changing their life, you're just delaying the inevitable. He said some people can compartmentalize that. He said you are going to really struggle, and in fact, I know that to be true. And one of the people we work with now, she's a trauma surgeon up here in Alaska. She did some training down in Memphis, Tennessee, which is a rough place to be a trauma surgeon.
yeah.
She had she she worked with people multiple times as a gunshot victim. So number one, you're a really good surgeon if you have repeat gunshot victim customers.
Right.
Number two, if you are that repeat gunshot victim customer, you probably need to rethink some of the decisions you're making with your life. Some of your life choices probably aren't
Right.
good. But that was kind of that what she was realizing, like, man, I'm just delaying the inevitable. Like, I'm not helping this person turn a corner in their life and change their life trajectory. They
Right.
are bound and determined to burn down their own life. I'm just maybe
Yeah.
pushing that day back a little bit. But with this, the type of coaching that we do, we don't just get to change their financial trajectory or their financial status. We can change how they experience life and the trajectory of that in all aspects of life going forward. And to your point, I don't think I would have been able to do that the same way as a surgeon. I mean, I could put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and that would have been great. That would have been awesome.
Right.
But for some of those people, it wouldn't have actually changed their life.
Well, it makes me think of, being a trauma surgeon, and I have a family member who is a trauma doctor in the ER and sees this stuff, as they're being carted out to surgery. If you're a victim of a drive-by shooting and you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, that's one thing. But like you said, if you're exposing yourself to that in that type of gang lifestyle, just making assumptions, Memphis is really rough right now for sure. And I know someone who lives there and says there's a concerted effort to clean it up, but it's going to take a while. And that is a great example of also what we see people do with their money
Yep.
over and over and over again until they finally go to the money surgeon and say, this is the last time I'm going to do this. Fix me up, put me back together, and you'll never see me again. And that's the kind of patient we want. It doesn't always work that way. And I think you actually have, was totally unintended, but this actually leads into your story of the dumbest thing you've ever done with money. So what is the dumbest thing you've ever done with money, Chad?
Well, so even though I knew better, and for a lot of people, the mistakes that we make, we do know better. And that's why I think that the counseling coaching side of this is so important, because it's not what you don't know that often gets you in trouble. It's what you do know that you don't do. And that can be in our health, it can be our relationships. So I got really into vehicles as a teenager, which is not rare, but by the time I was 19, I had 3 vehicles. I had my daily driver, which is a Mustang, and to some of your listeners who see what a Mustang looks like now, my Mustang was 15 years old in 1999, which, if you do the math on that, it's in 1984. So your listeners
Was
can
that
Google
a
what
was that a Fox body Mustang?
yes, and
Yes.
if you can Google what a 1984 Mustang looks like, it's not cute. They were uglier than homemade sin. And it had a V8 that burned more oil than gas, and which was great because they never had changed the oil, you just added more. But the V8 put out less power than a little 4-cylinder does today. So I didn't have this great, awesome car. I thought it was cool because I was a teenager and it was a Mustang, and there's the whole nostalgia attached to that. So that was my daily driver. And I had an off-road vehicle that probably had my most money dumped into this, with big tires, extra suspension. We're here in Alaska. We have less than 1 person per square mile here in Alaska. So there's a lot of wilderness to explore. A lot of it's pretty rough and rugged. And of course, I thought I needed a vehicle to be able to do that with. I found out that as good as Toyota is, Toyota trucks still cannot swim. I submerged it in a river, and so that was the end of my off-roading days. It was a river that was actually a glacier-fed river, and those are usually very silty. So you have very, very fine silt particles. It's almost like a grain of sand divided into smaller, tinier grains of sand. It gets into everything, and
Oh,
it absolutely destroyed the engine. Again, trucks aren't meant to swim. Learn that one the hard way.
oh man.
And then I had a third vehicle that was a Ford LTD, think old time cop car. And this sounds so stupid to say it out loud, but I got that vehicle to play car tag. Again, 18, 19-year-old male. And if people wondering, what is car tag? It's exactly what it sounds like. Total redneck. Yeah, we're rednecks in the Northwest. We would a few of us got these old vehicles, and we get these wide open fields, and we try to chase each other down in cars. And when you got hit, you were it. And
Right.
thankfully, nobody ever got hurt. It was so stupid on so many levels. But as a 19-year-old, I had 3 vehicles. And it wasn't just the cost of the vehicles, it was the upkeep and the maintenance. Because when you're playing car tag, things break. When you're off-roading, things break. And when you're 18, you're driving a Mustang the way you think a Mustang should be driven, you need repairs and maintenance. So it wasn't just the cost of the vehicles, it was the cost of maintaining them. And Suzanne, even I'm sitting here talking about it, making jokes about it, it still hurts to think about just how foolish that was, because it wasn't just the money that I had poured into it. It was also, and the opportunity cost of what could that money be worth now if I'd done something with it. But also it delayed me in growing up, because that money, when I finally went to college, I was 20. So I took 3 years off between high school and college, 17 to 20. And part of that delay was the excuse that I don't have money for college. And looking back, I'm like, yeah, you dummy, because you were spending it on vehicles.
Right.
That's why you didn't have money
Right.
for college. So it
What
had this
was
cascading.
your insurance like?
I remember 275. That I don't know if that was the highest, but I remember 275 a month. And this was 25 years ago.
Right.
275 a month for a teenager. And you could rent a place. You
Yeah.
could get like a little studio apartment, or probably even a small 1-bedroom apartment so that was rent that I was paying on car insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me
Man, that
laugh
was
because
dumb.
I always think of, yeah, I always think of teenage boys. Like whenever I have a client the kid is going and starting their driving life, it's just, you don't understand what this is going to do to your budget. And a lot of stuff has changed where even if the kid has their own car, if they're living in your household, they have to be on your policy, which can be unbelievably damaging when they get into an accident. And so not only are we doing car insurance for the kid, increasing our own policy by God knows how much, we should most likely be getting an umbrella policy for when they do get in a car accident and someone goes. And so just the thought process of any teenage boy starting to drive, forget about one that has 3 vehicles. It would be astronomical today.
Well, and obviously that's an extreme example, but I run into people all the time. And I say run into, hypothetically, or not metaphorically, not literally, not running into them
Yeah,
anymore. Car tag days are over.
it's over.
But people dump so much money into vehicles. And let me just explain to everybody who doesn't realize this. If it has wheels or it has an engine, it's not an investment. And somebody pushed back on that the other day, and they had they'd purchased like this old Camaro or something like that. I can't remember the numbers, but it was like, 30 years ago, they bought it for like $12,000. Now it's worth $28,000. Like, see, it's an investment. For 30 years, though, that's like a 3 or 4% return. It barely even kept up with inflation.
Right.
And even that is a rare phenomenon. How many vehicles can you hold for 30 years and they actually increase in value? So not only did he get lucky that his vehicle actually increased, it increased at such a low rate that he would have been better off in a CD or something like that anyways. And had he put that money in like a good growth stock mutual fund, that would have been over $100,000. He could have
Right.
taken that money and bought a brand new Corvette, or
I was going to say Corvette C7s are going for about $100,000. So
yeah, and they'll do 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds, which is insane. I mean, you're talking about a car that's as fast as a Ferrari that he could have bought had he just invested money. So I mean, but if it has 4 wheels and it has, or a motor, because boats, other things fall into this category too. They're money pits. They're not an investment. And so I've actually, I really encourage people to make sure their vehicle is a fraction of their net worth. So when I was 18, 19 years old, all of my net worth was vehicle. But even today, I try to keep it a very, very tiny percentage of my net worth. And I encourage people, 5% of your net worth or less. That means if you're driving a $50,000 vehicle, which, I mean, you could probably buy a brand new like Kia and spend 50
Mhm.
grand, right?
Oh god, you
I
could probably
remember,
still buy 2 Kias for 50 grand depending on what model they
well,
were.
no, but my point was like 50 grand a long time ago was like a really,
Oh,
really nice car. Like now, I mean, you can drop 50 grand on a minivan right now,
yes, yes. Oh gosh,
you
yeah,
know?
the
So,
full package with the vacuums and the,
so
bells and
50,
whistles and all those things, those are super expensive now.
so 50 grand doesn't get you as far as a lot of people would think in a new vehicle. And people don't really count the cost because they're just doing payments. They're not really thinking about how much am I actually going to pay for this vehicle. They're just thinking about how much is it going to cost me next month, you know? But 50 grand, that means if you're driving a $50,000 vehicle, your net worth should be over $1 million. Now,
Mm.
people don't have to agree with me and they don't have to listen, but I think if you're trying to really build financial freedom and you're trying to get yourself to a place where you're not living paycheck to paycheck, you have a sustainable wealth building strategy, your vehicle should be less than 5% of your net worth.
Yeah. I
So,
like what you said. It's funny what you said earlier about how you and your family were doing Dave Ramsey before you really knew who Dave Ramsey was. I grew up with the $10,000 car rule. I have never owned a new car in my entire life. If I've driven a new car, I must have rented it and just lucked out that it had 6 miles on it. You know what I mean? Like I've
mhm.
never actually owned or know that I've driven a brand new car. And so we grew up with the $10,000 car rule. With inflation at the end of 2023, the $10,000 car rule has slowly turned into the $15,000 car rule. But especially depending on your market, for here where we are in Virginia, Southern Virginia, getting a medium to small pickup truck, so think like a Ford Ranger or something like that, was almost impossible for 2.5 years. Almost
Yeah.
impossible. The increase in price was unbelievable. People were selling 10-year-old Ford Rangers for almost $20,000. And so now that's going to be a problem that we deal with cyclically, right? We have inflation, we have recessions, we have bear markets, we have bull markets. We can't control that, right? But we still have to make that. We can't use that as an excuse to go out and buy the $50,000 car and say, "Oh, I can't invest for retirement, or I can't save up my fully funded emergency fund because I have this." What is the average car payment? It's like $750
It's
a
over
month in America right now. It's
$700.
over
It's over
700. Okay.
$700 a month. Yep.
Right.
And if you think of a car payment too, so people generally they pay off their student loans eventually. Might take them 15 years. They pay off their house eventually, but a car loan is often a recurring debt that people, they'll drive it for a few years, then replace it with another. So if you think of somebody who has a car loan between the ages of 20 and 60, that car loan could almost fully fund a retirement. Just that. So
Oh,
driving a paid for vehicle that you actually paid cash for, which is going to freak out the salesman. They're not going to know how to deal with it when
yeah.
you're trying to write a check for your vehicle. But that decision alone could be the difference between living paycheck to paycheck your entire life and at some point living completely free from needing a job, having a work optional lifestyle if you start early enough and
Right.
forego two things. Number one, forego the car payment, but number two, have the discipline to take what would be going into a car payment and paying your future self instead of paying a car company.
Absolutely. Well, Chad, it's that time when I ask my wonderful guest if you could go back in time and change your decision, what would you do?
So number one, I think it would be to try to get myself, my 19-year-old self, to connect what I could have been doing differently with the money. Because sometimes when we look at what can I afford, it's like, well, I have the cash to pay for it, rather than, well, what could I do that would be better? with that money? Like, is this the
Mhm.
best decision for me? And at that time in my life, I wasn't thinking about the opportunity cost of that money. Nor was I thinking about the fact that, yeah, you might eventually want to go to college someday. You might want to do something a little bit more productive for your life than car tag. Um, all those things are going to cost money. And these vehicles aren't just opportunity costs in money, they're opportunity costs in time and experiences, because I was delaying really growing up with those vehicles, not to mention uh, the physical risk that I was taking with those decisions. So it was a very vivid picture of somebody who was stealing from the future version of themselves and pretending that they weren't. And I wish I could go back and ask myself, are you serving or stealing from the future version of you? And hopefully would have had the maturity to think about it and realize that, yeah, I was not investing myself. I was not investing in my future.
Right. Absolutely. Well, the reason I started this show, and I reiterate this from time to time, is that we've all made these financial mistakes. Everybody over the age of 14 has a story about something stupid they did with money. And sometimes it's, $20 and sometimes it's $20,000. And all of that you just told us makes you, in my mind, the better financial planner, because you know to ask that question. You already have that experience, that life experience that, some people, you just can't get that. You can't go to college and get that. You have to make the mistakes. And that's why we're doing what we're doing out here, right?
Well, and here's what's so powerful about your show, and after listening to a few episodes, a lot of the mistakes that people have come on your show to talk about are mistakes I see all the time, but we
Yeah.
too often hide that. We pretend that we're doing everything right, and we only talk about our wins. And the problem with that is then other people repeat our failures. They repeat our mistakes. And it's kind of like that whole thing that we talk about in church, where it's like, oh, hey, you doing? Oh, God's great, God's wonderful, feeling blessed today. And but the inside, they're on anti-anxiety pills because they're so stressed about their work or their marriage is failing. We put on this facade like everything's going great. And not only does it cheat ourselves from growing and learning from that experience, but it cheats others. I just love the fact that you get people on here, you ask them these questions because your audience can resonate with that. They can relate. Like, I'm not the only one. So that's one. But number two, I'm not the only one. And this person recovered and made a change. And they no longer identify themselves that person. Because that's the other problem too, is some of these mistakes, like you said, people make them over and over again. They
Yeah.
start to identify themselves as that type of person. And I think that you give people hope that you can make all these mistakes and they might have riddled your past, but they don't have to define your future.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you have the chance to make a new choice and a change in who you are from this moment on, an inflection point where the mistakes that riddle your past do not define your future. You get to change, or you get to decide who you become.
Yes. Great note to go out on, Chad. Thank you so much for joining me today. All of Chad's contact information is in the show notes, as always, so you can reach out to him on his website, Instagram, Facebook, or email. Chad, thanks so much for being with us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, my pleasure. It's a blessing.